Ooh.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's facts, man. You live,
yeah.
fellas. You live. You know.
all day.
So,
Yeah, man. You know what's going on, man. We just jumping right in this morning. You know what I'm saying? Appreciate you guys for joining us in. Finally figured out how to get us back to the group. So it should be on the group. We should be seeing it on the group here. But appreciate you, man, as always. Appreciate you guys for tuning in, man. Appreciate you guys supporting us. Appreciate the commentary and the comments in the Facebook group. You know what I'm saying? And most definitely appreciate Dr. Ham for coming on, man, for spitting his wisdom. You know what I'm saying, and having a conversation. Yeah. What's up, fellas? What's happening?
man, everything good, man. We back at it, man. I'm just glad to see Dr. Ham back at it, joining us in this conversation because, you know, when the conversation happens, like we start seeing the lightning bolts. I mean, we just was talking about ideas and so forth and before we got on, but this is what it should look like in a space of community.
Yeah. I told you, Tay, man, people think that the Underground Railroad lost its purpose,
Mm.
but it has not.
Mhm.
It just went above ground. So
No.
Underground Railroads went above ground. So now a northerner can talk to a southerner in real time.
Yeah.
See, I can get the war of ideas real time, where before it would take weeks and months
Mhm.
to get a message from the north to the south. And the danger that you see happening is the quicker that you can remove arguments, the quicker conflict comes. And I
Mhm.
think what people are realizing that conflict is starting at the house first. That's why house divided can't stand. There's
Yeah.
there's people whose houses are being divided because of these issues. It ain't just the politics, it's war, but it's about division first. Because before we start the fight, we have to divide ourselves into camps. And you're seeing people now dividing themselves into the camps that they will eventually want to fight for or be silent in, if you catch my drift.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because like I
Yeah.
said, most people don't want to fight. They want to just sit on the sidelines and then just sneak this, and then they want to just be, how people are, they want to just antagonize and be
Yeah.
passive aggressive.
Right.
And that passive aggressiveness has to be called out for what it really is: aggression.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
aggression, but we just give it passiveness, no, because it starts here,
Yeah.
and we have to call that out when we see it.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of labeled the title, after me and you talked yesterday, like distortion in American politics, because that's really what's happening is that our politics is being distorted into these culture war issues. So nobody wants to have a conversation anymore about policies, right? Nobody wants to talk about deficits anymore. Nobody wants to talk about spending anymore. That stuff's on the back burner to LGBTQ issues. Of course, we have the DEI woke. You know what I mean? We got a vice president right now, vice president who was a district attorney general, went to one of the prestigious HBCUs in America, got called a DEI hire, not once, not twice, but several times, man. And again, it's not about policies anymore. It is about where and it's not about ideas anymore. You know what I'm saying? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
running against a nepo baby in Trump, and then also JD Vance, which got a leg up from two billionaires in
Hmm.
his in like the stats don't stack up, right? I just was speaking to Southern gentleman at the gas station yesterday, and I got an RGB flag on the front of my truck, choking out the snake. You know what I mean? And so he's staring at it,
Yeah.
and he started with the gas prices and so forth and so forth. So we went into a conversation, and I had to explain to him about how the president don't control the gas and so forth. So we went down that road. So he finally understood that, but then he's stuck in. Then they're trying to hand uh, Kamala Harris, who hasn't done nothing for America, to us. I said, if you got a few minutes, I can explain it to you. And so I went down the road of of the policy she had when she first started. I didn't even get into the later stuff. She was like, he said, man, I didn't know she did all of this stuff. I said, because it's the media that you consume.
Oh,
And
yeah.
when I said that, his face was with shock, because people don't understand what you were talking about. The kinetic energy that you're taking in is the words of other people. And he didn't realize, as he's driving a 25-year-old truck and talking about how he can't afford to live, that he's supporting the people that's causing him to sit back and not get educated, not be able to afford to live, and so forth. But he's okay with going in the store and just drowning it in some beer.
Hey, it's America's oldest pastime, man. You know, we get to a point nowadays where I'm glad that you took the time and the energy to make an argument or a defense, because so often we get jaded having to play the same tape over and over. It's like, look, man, there comes a time when you have to start asking yourself tough questions. And if you're only going to do it around people who challenge you, then you're not going to have any motivation to go and research on your own. And I think that the platforms are powerful because it's like a politician giving a stump speech. You just keep saying the same thing over and over. And then it's like the U.S. Olympic team has a play with Steph and LeBron. It's called Too Small. And LeBron goes like this, and essentially, I'm going to run the pick and roll opposite way. You know, the big guy going to run it against a small guy. But they run the signal in front of the defense. They don't care that you know what they're about to do.
Right.
They tell you to play and say, come stop.
Yeah.
And in American history, we've never had that luxury here. We can't tell our adversary to play because they've always had more resources. They've had bigger centers. They've had quicker defenders. But now we're seeing parity at the idea level, not at the resource level. We have parity, and you know, there's this idea that there's nothing quicker than the speed of light. Let's reject that idea out hand, because nothing is more faster or powerful than an idea whose time has come, because it can travel to the minds of people outside of your ability to conceptualize it. And see, when you say something to somebody, you don't know where you are at in the process of their development or awakening. You don't know.
Right.
You might be the initial seed of their awakening. You might be a continuation of things they've been told for years, or you could be the one person who, after they've done the research, now you have become the person that it just snaps for them. And it's like, boom, because they have nowhere else to hide, because they've been running from everybody. And now they have to, it's like what Sun Tzu said, if you put somebody in the corner, they're going to fight harder. See, and the beauty of it is like, I love the corner. That's why I feel I'm comfortable. Like Muhammad Ali, rope-a-dope, put me in the corner, because I'm not going to use emotional arguments. I'm not going to try to pander to what you want to hear. I'm going to tell you the truth, and it's going to hit you hard enough to give me the time to breathe.
Right.
And I think we've gotten to a point where we have to be comfortable in being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And no one teaches us that.
Yeah. And most definitely, like in our society today, man, like, you know, we're seeing it, you know, again, I try to tell people all the time, man, we are living in historical moments in historical time. Like, history is happening right now. You know what I'm saying? To where you're right, there is a challenge of ideas, right? So, starting in 2016, they were attacking, critical race theory, right? Because critical race theory was attacking not only the idea of the infrastructures of America, it was also attacking, you know what I'm saying, like American society. You know what I mean? Like, hey, trying to wake people up to say, hey, we're not going to get to this this apex, or we're not going to stop the decline that we're currently on if we don't have a radical change in the system. And that radical change in the system has to include everyone. And what was the response of that idea was we're going to get rid of anybody who thinks that way. And we realize that the thinking begins in school, in middle school, and in high school, and things of that nature. So we are going to draft legislation that says you can't teach CRT, even though CRT is not being taught in schools. Really, what they meant was a diversity of thought cannot be executed in school. You know what I'm saying? So you can't be this teacher that comes from, you know, some diverse university.
Or to be clear, Black thought can't be taught.
Oh yeah. No,
because
very clear.
You can teach about you can teach about all the other folks, but don't talk about Black thought. So that's they ain't banning that stuff.
That's fact. That's fact.
They're almost outright saying it now at this point. Like Doc just got done saying it, like he was laying out, is they feel like they are in the corner. So they have nothing else. They have no direction of to go. They can't dip left. They can't dip right.
Ain't nowhere to go.
It's nowhere to go. So now they're just swinging.
Yeah, and you support a candidate that is so polarizing that you cannot defend his statements. It's like when Joe Biden said that if you don't vote for me, you're not Black. There was a outcry in the Black community of like, hey, Joe, slow down, bro. You don't determine who is or is not Black.
Yeah.
It was a watershed moment in the Black community, because one of the greatest white privileges in America is to determine who is or is not Black.
Right.
That's the greatest privilege that they possess.
Yeah.
Their biggest superpower is I can put the label on you of socially inferior class by your color.
Right.
Now we're saying, like, look, you can still do that because that's your right. You have a right to be a bigot and racist. We understand that. However, we now have to use the same way we did with Biden when he said that. We got to say the same thing about Kamala when he does it with her, because it's not about Democrat or Republican. It's about consistency and continuity of a community that has been divided because of ideas of people who were there to essentially move the window, Overton window, essentially the level of what you cannot say in conversation in public. There's a level of acceptable conversation, but when the person at the top is moving the window to an extremist, then the people who are beneath him will follow suit. If he can talk about Black people and Black jobs and Black things, then I can do it too, because he moved the window for me to now say, well, my candidate does it, because we always want to elect people who can do and say the things that we cannot do because we are afraid or cowards in most instances on the right, because they understand that if you come to me in my face and talk about some of that Trump stuff, we'll have a problem. So you know that. And I think that's the disingenuous part of it. It's a sleeper cell. And I talked to you about that, because that nationalist idea is being woken, because people, especially and I say this to my Christian brothers and sisters, I say this with love and respect, is that the organization is set up for authoritarian rule. Because Jesus is not coming back for democracy or republican. He's coming back to rule with an iron fist, to rule over the nations. That's in their theology. So he's not coming back to sing Kumbaya. He's coming back to be a dictator. He's coming back to have people kneel to his will, and he will rule them. So they understand this psychologically. Their worldview says, I don't need to vote for my power because my authority is going to come to take it away from you. That's in their worldview. And whether they want to talk about that openly or not, it's their problem. But it exists. And there are radical natures in this idea that the people who are unsuspecting will get caught up into the confusion to thinking that white ethno-nationalists in America has the same Jesus that you had from the plantation.
Yeah, right.
They're different Jesuses.
Right.
You know, and we got to talk about that.
Yeah, and that's you got anything to say, bro?
No.
Okay. Yeah, and and it's very interesting because during this time, I think one thing that I've come, I've always been woke about, but again, we're living in a historical moment to where, I can see it and talk about it. You know what I'm saying? Is that the majority of white Americans, because I listen to conservative radio, going into work, because I got to listen to what the other side is saying. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so But what I realized, especially when Trump was at the National Association for Black Journalists, and he talked about Vice President Kamala Harris, and again, part of this is mispronouncing her name on purpose. You know what I mean? And he said, I didn't know she was black. You know what I'm saying? And there was no outcry. You know what I'm saying? The same as, like you said with Joe Biden. But one thing I realized in that moment is that, and listening to conservative radio and stuff, that white people know nothing about black people. White people know, I mean, by and large, unless they assimilate themselves into black culture, black community, by and large, the great majority of white folks know nothing about black people. You know what I'm saying? And it's assumed, you know what I'm saying? But the sad part is there are black people who know nothing about black people. And so, they don't understand that, yes, Kamala Harris is black. You know what I mean? They bring it up and be like, well, she's not black. Like, her dad's Jamaican. Do you not understand you're arguing for a label we didn't create?
Yes.
Right. We never create that label, and that label is to identify you by phenotype. And it's like one of those things where like I kind of be privy to not just saying Asian or Hispanic and aggregating it out to the ethnic communities and things of that nature. You know what I'm saying? But there is I've been open to like, hey man, look, they don't know nothing about black folk. You know what I'm saying? And so it's hard educating a society.
I think that what they know about us, if to say they do anything at all, is from propagandistic sources.
Right.
So they know that they've seen Boys in the Hood. They know about Menace to Society. They know the caricatures of black culture. They know the exploitation of the black culture. And they also know the grievances that we have too. So tell you what they won't say. They do know they don't want to be black here. Like James Baldwin said, rest in peace, James. They know they don't want to be black here. They know that for sure.
Yeah.
And everything else they tell you is a lie. But the truth starts with an acknowledgement that, and we've always talked about this issue, that the concept of race was for controlling of resources, ultimately. Right. If you go back historically, it wasn't because black people were inferior. I mean, Martin Delaney exposed this whole argument. It was because we were able to be easily distinguished from the dominant population for the purpose of work. So if we ran away, it was easy to capture us. Because if a white Irish dude ran away, nobody knew that white Irish dude was an indentured servant. But they knew to get us easily. So in order to protect their resources, they had to create arguments that made us inferior for their own moral issues. And this is important to me because the last issue in a war is the morality issue. When someone takes a position that they have moral superiority over you, or that their God authorized them to treat you a certain way, there is no more reason and logic that can happen. For example, when you say it is God's will that I own this land, then who am I to contradict what your God said? We got to fight now, because if my God said it's my land and your God said it's your land, we're at an impasse. So one of us ain't hearing God correctly.
Yeah.
So let's fight this out, and their winner's God will be victorious. And the reason this is important when it comes to strategic thinking is that there are certain people who are already making a moral argument when it's not necessary. They're making a moral argument that's not necessary. So, for example, no one's coming out into defending this dude's felonies. Nobody's making a moral argument. They're saying that we're electing a president, not a pope. They're already justifying the moral depravity of the individual because he's lawless. And lawless people produce lawless followers because they need lawless followers to do their lawless deeds because they're already considered lawless. So you have nothing to gain by continuing in your lawless activity because you've seen that the system will not check you because you are too big to fail, in a political speech where I can shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and won't get arrested. You can think that way psychologically because you understand that the system that would imprison you will not hold you. And the same reason that they would not try Jefferson Davis and Robert E. Lee after the Civil War for the same exact reason, because they understood that they had an argument that you could not fight them with. Like if we had to go to a jury and Robert E. Lee and Jeff Davis had to go into a jury probably in a southern state, which it happened at, or federal court, they would probably be found not guilty.
Yeah.
If you look at it logically, because they never said we entered into a lifelong pact with you. We want to renegotiate our contract. And the country said, no, this is non-negotiable. And they want to renegotiate the contract. And I think the dangerous idea is that we've never had any generation in history that cannot relitigate the past. Any generation in current can relitigate the past. So when you say we're living in historical times, I would say that we are living in historical times because we're relitigating those times. We're now going back and saying, you know what arguments were good back then? And the people that I'm seeing, they're making arguments that have already been debunked, but they don't know it yet.
Yeah.
Like you're arguing for an argument that John C. Calhoun had in 1840, that slavery was good for us. But bro, that argument, make that argument today. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And nobody on the conservative side is giving them new arguments to make. And I think that's their frustration, is that their intellectuals have not been helpful for them.
Well, yeah, I think you pointed out a few things where what we're seeing in society is you need a structural a social structural fear based going up the ladder to keep other people in social groups or economic groups in control.
Yes.
You can go to the poorest area and it will be someone who's only slightly more economically well off that controls the poorest of that group.
Oh yeah.
And you can see this all through society. You go into any city, any major city, and so on and so on. And the licenses that you start to see from the top down is what people like J.D. Vance, Donald Trump, and you can go to Tim Scott, you can go all of these people. This is the tool that they use to keep everyone else in a system of control.
Oh yeah.
Because then you implement gun legislation, right?
Yep.
Well, the reason why they won't do anything about gun legislation, well, look at the economic group that's usually affected in that violent realm, right?
Yes.
And we are seeing this tool being used, but the problem is Republican voters can't identify what that is, because like what you're saying is they don't have true intellectual.
And I will say this. I think that the brightest of them today can see the writing on the wall that the others cannot see. The brightest of them know that this will end in violence. So just to be clear, they're talking about civil war for a reason. They're talking about civil war. That Heritage Foundation dude talked about civil war. The dude from Ohio, Lang, said, if we lose, we need a civil war. So to me, it's like this. The first two times you say something, I'm going to think that there's a pattern.
Yeah.
The third time you say it, I'm thinking it's going to affect me.
Yeah.
Because now, this is in my state where they just had a dude fly the Confederate flag in a public easement for the first time since we remember. So, and I told him, I said, listen, as long as you can fly your battle flag openly, the rebellion's not over. If I can still fly my flag of treason in your land, my fight is not over. Because one of the last stakes that you do is when you go to war, you destroy the standards of your enemy. You burn them. That's throughout all of history. When France went into to Germany, they took their standards. They took all their Frederick the Great things. And then when France lost, before they could capture their standards, they burnt everybody's stuff up because they were like, we don't want these standards to get into our enemy's hands because they can use these for motivation and a rallying cry. And we have not discussed this issue, because I tell people all the time, when that dude on January 6th took that Confederate flag into the Capitol, at that specific moment, the Confederacy was reborn, because that flag had been kept out of that building for hundreds of years. So when they saw that, it was like, we're reborn. And the only problem that you run into is that when you have a flag and a standard that's so divisive, what it creates is, in a politically divisive time, we already have a symbol of radicalization that we don't need to make a new one. We have a defiant signal already. This is the banner of those who will try to essentially do it. And for a large part of it, and I think it's unfortunate that the party, that the Republicans cannot denounce this threat. But I think it's telling that those who start civil wars are those who have had the majority, who are finding themselves losing power politically, but they still own the resources. So there's an impasse. And Lucy Parsons says that rich people will not allow you to vote their wealth away from them. They're just not going to allow it. And because they won't allow it, they know that the kinetic answer is best. And because politics is local, you will see it happen in your community, in your home first. People getting divorced over politics now. I just can't be with you right now because you support this. I can't be with you. I don't know who you are. So it starts in your home. It spreads to your job. It's when you have the white people on your job who start having to let you know that they're safe. You ever had that before? Where they have to let you know that, hey, I ain't one of those.
Yeah.
You've had some of those conversations.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's a very telling time, and in an environment where we don't talk about politics, people having for you to let them know they're safe.
Yeah.
Because there'll be things that happen that will cause people to be irrational in their fears, to your point earlier. So they'll stop listening to sound arguments because they've now entered into a space where fear has taken over their mind.
Yeah, because fear is the lowest part of cognitive thinking, right?
Yes.
The process of critically thinking, and so forth. And then after that, beneath that is violence.
Oh yeah. They're closely related.
Yeah, they're so close related, and I started to understand that because growing up, it was my key response. If I didn't like something, I am dead silent, and what comes after that is violence, because I could not articulate how I felt, what was bothering me, what was going on. I started taking this journey when I was in high school, and I met a teacher, and she was in middle school with me, but like I didn't latch on to her until high school because it was one moment that I was in this uncomfortable moment, and I lashed out at a teacher.
Oh, okay.
Almost grabbed him and almost hit him. And so she grabbed me and she pulled me in a room, and immediately she started explaining to me about how society looks at, one, color, two, my height, and how to approach society by, one, basically tone policing.
Yeah.
Because I'm tall, had to speak softer.
Assimilation.
Yeah. And she was teaching me how to assimilate, and then also
how to code switch too.
How to code switch. Maneuver through society.
Yes.
And articulate all of those different things along the way before I get violent.
Oh yeah. And see, this is where the beauty of it is. And this is where I think I like the Christian teaching about spiritual warfare, because I think spiritual warfare is psychological warfare. I think if we use the word spiritual and psychological in its place, people will understand it more, because we're fighting with our minds. We're not fighting with our fists first. So he says, like, the weapons of their warfare are not carnal, not human. We're not fighting with swords and bullets. We're fighting with our minds. And I'm fine, if you're fighting with your minds, you need the words that the mind fights with. The mind fights with words and the use of them artfully. And when I say that I can remove the pretense, meaning I can fight somebody and I don't have to be co-located with them. I can fight you from another country. I can fight you from another state because I'm not fighting you with my hands. I'm fighting you with this. And you don't want to fight that because I prepared it to be fought in environments that are austere. I prepared to fight because I understand that my greatest defense is not having to be offensive. I don't have to be, because what I do now, I'll use the Socratic method now. The Socratic method is just me asking you questions about what you think, how you see the world. It's me having you question what you're saying to me. That's it. Because I've already questioned what I've said to myself.
Yeah.
And then I've questioned it against history. I've questioned it against arguments that were made by people who were much more in tune. You know, I question it against at the detriment. There was something that Charleston White said. You know, I listen to people who have different perspectives all the time. I think that's how you grow. And he says that, you know, when we talk about Dr. King, sometimes we look at Dr. King and we say, this guy had a dream in the 1960s that there would be equality, holding hands racially. And it's like, well, what's our 2024 dream? Are we still living for one dude's dream who was essentially given to us by a system that said, this is the acceptable way to protest us. Here's his dream. You better use his dream, because if you have a dream that's different than his or divergent from his dream, there's going to be violence met to you. And that idea of separatism has always been problematic for Black people in America, because you can't separate here. Because no matter where you go, there you are. You're separated yourself in ideas. And we were talking about the other day is that being Black in America is not a color. It's not a skin color. It's a condition. And it's a way of seeing the world. It's a foundational lens. It's a perceptive way. And you don't have to be Black to understand it. That's what people confuses them. You don't have to be Black to understand the Black experience. Now, you do have to be Black in America to undergo it, though. Because there are certain things that's only going to happen to you when you go into a store and you realize I'm being watched.
Yeah.
Or you've been able to vibrate at a higher frequency, and you're saying that James Baldwin I think he puts it the best way possible. He says, it's ghastly for those who have to undergo what we go through, but what does it say about the person who does it? What does it say about them? And I think that question is a question of morality. But then I look at Stokely, and he says, in order for nonviolence to be effective, your people must have a conscience. The people must have a conscience. And he argued that the people that you're trying to be nonviolent with have no conscience. So although it's great intended, it won't be successful. And from a strategic perspective, I don't think we knew what to do with that analysis.
Yeah.
I don't think we knew how to conceptualize that we cannot appeal to the emotions or conscience of people who have a seared conscience.
Yeah.
And then the appeal to me is not to them anymore. So I don't make any effort to appeal to people, because I feel like my energy is better spent talking to people who have open-minded or ready to receive data. Because
I think that's the divergence that we're in right now. Whenever you're talking to a Republican voter, whenever you listen to a Republican legislator, we are at that particular divergence.
Yes. Yeah. Tim Scott, before Tim Scott went to the Senate, the last senator from the South that was Black was Blanche Brew, who left office in 1881. Tim Scott was elected in 2013. So between 2013 and 1881, there's a bunch of years in there. Yeah. And there wasn't one. So for you to be the first one in over like 160 almost years, for you to say no problems, it's to me silly to me. It's silly. Not to say that America isn't what it is, but to say that we don't have progress to make. Right. Like, to me, that's disingenuous, because you are the exception. And the scenario that I like to do is this. if I take a person in America who came from an impoverished area, I'll leave their color out of this. Just came from an impoverished area. They didn't have access to any resources as far as educational, didn't have the latest books, didn't have the latest technology, any of those things that their peers had. But they enter into a room of people with privilege. They're entering a room with people with privilege. Now, how will the people of privilege, knowing this person's story, perceive them? Will they perceive them as a peer, or will they perceive them as a threat?
Right.
And what threat do they see? They see three distinct possibilities. This person is exceptional, a savant, overcomer, hard worker, etc., a credit to their race. That's one perspective. The second perspective that I see happening is this person is a threat to my children who are not working as hard, because if this person actually had the resources and still got into this room, what does it say about my kids who have the resources and didn't get here? That's dangerous. So, and then my last option is, after looking at both of those, now I have to create a strategy for both of them. I need a message for both of them, but I can't make the message, because if I make the message, then it will reinforce my own bigotry and bias. So I can't acknowledge how hard you worked to get here, because if I acknowledge how hard you worked, I have to acknowledge how hard I didn't work. So I'm not going to shoot myself in my foot to give you praise. And so the problem that they're running into is that we have now made our own arguments for them. Black people in America give white people their arguments because Black people say things about us that white people know they cannot say anymore. So when I talk to people who are making arguments to support their own enslavement, what it is mentally, my thought process is, why would you do this? And it goes back to, you see a logical reason for aligning yourself with people who do not have your strategic interest in mind, but they can tactically exploit you. Because like I said, if you were to wake up tomorrow, there's 10 people waiting to take your place at this table, and they're all more rabid than you are. They all are more hungry than you, and they all have less integrity. Because anybody who will get to that table in that room, and once I get into the room, because I was exceptional, I have a choice now I have to make. Do I go back to the people and tell them what's actually talking about in that room? Do I take it, what I'm learning in my neighborhood, do I take it, what's happening in that room, do I take it back to people in my area? Now, most people will say no. They won't take it back, because they understand the reason that you stay in this room is because you don't take it back. That's why what keeps you in this room. You don't come back and share it with people. Those who go back and share it are some of the most, I would say, skillful people, because in order to share and still get the data requires that dual consciousness that Du Bois talked about. And most people can't wrestle with the dual consciousness, because if your conscious gets split, like let's say your personality gets split, you have multiple personality disorder. You can make an argument that code switching is pathologically code switching is similar to split personality. Psychologically, because what you're having to do to code switch is because, to your point about fear, is the lowest vibration you're going to be at. But your highest vibration is your authentic self. And people don't know that. You just being you, Tay, you just being Jay, that's your most authentic power, because you can be you in this room and you can be you in that room. And guess what? You don't have to worry about the thing you said in this room making you a hypocrite in that room. And when you can say the same thing no matter where you go, you are authentic. And authentic people, it's hard to argue with them, because authentic people want to understand you first. They don't want to be right. I want to understand your position. Hell, you know what? There have been times I've talked to people and they've wanted me to give an answer right on the spot about on a boom. And I'm like, let me educate myself first. Let me read about this. Let me see if I'm missing something, because the first theory that I have may be correct.
It's also morality in there as well.
Yes, but abductive reasoning is that I'm only going to make the best decision I have based on the data that I have. That's bounded rationality. And what has happened is we've let people who have underachieved been our litmus test for success. And it's like, no, you can't do that because you didn't achieve anything. Like the lady, what's the lady from NASA? Hidden Figures lady. Hidden Figures.
Oh yeah,
the lady who went to NASA and helped them do the trajectory to land the rockets on the moon and re-entry. Okay, so look at this. Let's conceptualize. Why would you call this a hidden figure?
right.
Why wouldn't you call this person a giant that was suppressed? Why, instead of saying you were a hidden figure, how about you were a suppressed giant? Because if I say you're a suppressed giant, then I can now give you some validity and I can give you some credibility that goes beyond you being hidden. And I can say that the only reason you were a hidden figure is because I was a bigot. If I wasn't a bigot, you wouldn't have been hidden. And you wouldn't have been a figure. They may have named some buildings after you because what you did was so substantial, and you came from a background where we did not expect someone like you to have the capabilities to be able to essentially assimilate and then create. Because assimilation is important. And you were talking about this, Jay, about assimilation. The teacher who taught you how to assimilate.
Yes.
The teacher. But see, think of it this way. Was she black or white?
She was white.
Exactly. Now, my grandmother had a very similar story about a teacher helping her because she was very violent. She didn't have her words, so she was physical. And what happened is that it's not a problem as much as it is an evolutionary cycle. If that makes any sense. It's an evolutionary cycle to do violence when you don't have the alternative knowledge. That's what we do. That's the human nature. Man, apart from words, are a beast. We didn't have words and to organize ourselves, and we all operate on our own vibration, we would just be out here not creating civilizations or community. It is our words that allow us to create community so that we can reason together. So when Tay has an idea, he runs it by Jay. And when Jay and Tay agree, now Jay and Tay can form a bond. And then they can now share with their agreement with somebody else who might disagree. But since they are in agreement, now what will happen is you can now create community by our agreement, and not on everything. Because I think people think because we're black, we got to agree with everything that's black. It's like, no, bro. Listen, you got black people who are all over the political spectrum, more so than white people. But if you don't know, in the book that I was trying to find is we have to understand the role of Uncle Tom in our community. The role that he plays, the role that Sambo plays, because they are characters in our community, but they haven't changed historically. They're the same people. It's not a person, it's an archetype. It's the role you play. That is, sometimes it's like when you have a movie where it's the useful idiot in the movie. He's not there to move the story along. He's just there to kill some airtime. And a lot of these individuals, I see them as just taking up airtime. You're not here to solve any problems. You're not here to fix the issues in your local community. It's like you worry about what's going on in California and Texas, but like, what about in your neighborhood? What about your street?
Oh man,
but because if politics is local, the war starts local. Because that's when we talked about our last episode. The war starts local. And if you want to be honest, it starts so local that it starts with yourself. That's why the revolution won't be televised. It starts in here because you have to go to war in your own mind with no one around. No help, just you and your thoughts have to go to war. And
man, it's so funny that you said that because I talked to my coworker and we kind of, I got a spoon feed him.
Yeah.
Right? Because he's been raised in the South. And the way that he started looking at society, so some of the stuff it has all of the markings of misogyny, sexism, like all these different different things. So we got to talking one day, and I simply said to him, I said, man, did you ever think about like all of this stuff that what we think today was all just made up? Just through thought and conversation? And he sat back, was just like, nah, I never thought about it. I said, I'll give you an example. I said, the idea of money and how it actually functions. We know it's a piece of paper. But how did we come to believe a dollar was a dollar when it's just a piece of paper?
Mm.
I said, that right there is how society is shaped and formed. We can all believe that it's $100, but you have to convince people that it's $100. And he was just like, man, I never thought about that. I said, that's why none of this stuff really exists.
Yeah, objective. Yeah, and there's a reality that you see happening is that, or etymology of the word is always more important than the usage to me, because the usage can be distorted, but the origin cannot be.
Right, exactly.
You can distort the word debate. Debate means to go to war, not to exchange ideas. So the etymology of a debate means we're fighting. Your ideas are fighting my ideas. And when we start to fight ideas, what most people have realized is that you would say you don't bring a knife to a gunfight. And in a debate, you don't bring ignorance to wisdom. Because if you bring ignorance to wisdom, it will correct you. And a wise man loves correction. But a fool rejoices in their folly. And I think that that's so important, because when you can allow people, to your point, Jay, to conceptualize an idea that has never entered their mind for the first time, you enter into a part of their brain that opens different neural pathways. And this is where philosophy comes in, because the philosopher's job is to open up pathways. Because I have to, in order for me to put an idea in your mind, I have to go into the part of your mind where you put ideas at. And you put ideas in two places in your mind. You put them in the frontal cortex, and you put them in the emotional centering of your brain. And for our community, what I've seen happening is there's a lot of emotional reasoning in our community. And I think that a lot of it is because we were raised by people who could not give us wisdom, in the sense that our former generations have left us with problems they didn't solve. They didn't fix the problems of racism in America. They left it up to us. And I would submit to you all, they didn't give us good tools either. And it's not a knock on anybody. It's not a, like, you did the best you could with what you had.
With what you had, yeah.
Yeah, you did the best you could with what you had. However, they taught you that spiritual was spiritual, not psychological.
Right.
So you didn't realize they were fighting a war in your mind, and you were fighting a war for that buses. For example, in Montgomery, economics, during the Montgomery bus boycott was successful for several reasons. One is because 75% of the bus riders were Black. 75% of your ridership was Black, and they couldn't get on the front of the bus.
Yeah,
75%. You had a lot of people standing up, so it worked because the percentage of people who had cars were low or Black. So the alternative was like, wait a minute, let's pool our resources together and let's fight the system economically, because they understand economics. They don't understand emotions, because your concerns will fall on deaf ears to people who don't need you, especially in a society where you don't have any incentive to acknowledge anything that has happened to you traumatically. Because we are getting into a point now where people are losing friends they've had for 20 years.
Right. Yeah.
People are losing marriages and relationships, and family members ain't talking to each other. And we're finding out that the division is because we didn't know how to communicate without understanding that in order to be a student, you have to be one. No one makes you a student. A have to endure painful application to yourself for the purpose of knowledge. And if you want to be a student, it's going to hurt. And where it's going to hurt is those ideas that we have built that were not sturdy or on logical grounding. And I think that's what we're seeing today. We're seeing people's foundations being cracked because they built it on an idea that you're supposed to be a Christian nationalist.
Right.
And it's like, no, you're not.
Right.
You're not.
You can be whatever you technically want to be in this day and age with all the information and all this before you can wake up and literally just walk and do whatever.
Yeah.
You make the conscious choice to then pick up whatever religious text or so forth and try to live under that umbrella. But that is a personal conscious choice. That is not societal once you go. But to your point, Doc, as you were speaking, the philosophy kept on popping in my head. A wise man knows that he knows nothing at all.
Yeah.
No, it's not Eric Badu for y'all folks. Badu took it from one of the great philosophers, Greek philosophers. But that right there is one of the things. Is one of the pillars of my life. Because even if I think that I know something, I challenge myself at the moment to say, is there other information?
Yeah.
And at that point, if I do not find any other information, I settle with the information that I have for the time being. That's the key, for the time being. It doesn't mean that I won't make my adjustments later on or so forth. I try to make those adjustments.
Oh yeah.
Doesn't mean that I'm going to be perfect or so forth. But I see people struggling in this cycle, and it's funny because me and the missus were just talking about this because she was talking about the garden and so forth. And so no, she was just talking about like our personal garden.
Oh, okay.
And how she learned, because we would get out and we're debating on water, how much water and how much vitamins and so forth. And I always get to an end. Well, we'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see. And so she said, I never thought about what you kept trying to say to me every time that we got out there, and I felt like we were making a mistake at that moment. I said, it was about patience. And she said, you were really just teaching me how to be patient, how to then be patient enough to see change or then make a change.
Yeah. And but to your point on patience, and this is what I will tell you, that in war, the patient people don't go first. The patient people don't go for it first, because what you're seeing is that you only go first in war when it's advantageous. And I'm learning that there are times when you could go to war, but it would be a Pyrrhic victory, meaning you would win, but what did I get? Like, what did I really get? I mean, I didn't get anything, but I'm learning that it's scaling the scope of the war. See, if we do little things well, it can be inferred that we can do larger things better. Because I don't want you to be doing a large project if you can't do a small project first. So there's levels to it. And when you start to talk to people, and I would say that the hardest divisions that I've seen happen are foundational divisions. Because when I have a framework division with somebody, their only way we can reconcile it usually is I can avoid you, I can accommodate you, I can compromise with you, I can collaborate with you, or I can use coercive force or violence. Usually most people will take avoidance instead of having to do it. But to your point earlier is, how long does it take you in real time to acknowledge the fact that my argument isn't sound? Because see, I'll start off with that premise. I'll start with the premise that I'm ready to be educated by anybody. I'm ready to be.
Mhm.
I'm in an educating ready mode. So I'm in an education setting. However, in order to educate me, I have to see that the frame that you're trying to share with me is your perspective of what I'm saying, not your reality, because they're different. Because people will say anything they want to you, but they won't tell you what they've seen. They won't tell you experiences. And see, I'm going to tell you what I've seen correlates to. I put a post about Black women after that Sonya Massey was shot. And I said, Black women, are you guys afraid to call the police? And the only reason that I said that is because there are people who have a fear, but they can't voice it.
Right.
And when you cannot voice a concern in a society that gives you freedom of speech, the question you have to ask is, are you free?
Yeah.
Are you free if I can't voice it? And if I can disclose information with people for the purpose of understanding, and people who can't do that don't like those who can, because I want data so that I can make informed decisions, so that when I quantify your data, or when I can put it together and I can say there's a general apprehension between Black females between this age demographic. Now they'll still call the police, but they have limited to these things they're going to call for. They've got the window of things you're going to call the police for shrunk because they're starting to see too many issues, and they're saying, wait, I'm only seeing this happening to one demographic in our population. I'm not seeing an over representation of Eurocentric females being murdered by the police for help calls. I'm not seeing that. You have to explain to me why. And what I'm learning is that not only are the arguments that they have been using ineffective, they're insensitive, they're dismissive, and they're callous. And I think that you can be all the things you want to be and still be freaking like compassionate. Like somebody lost their life, and saying that it was a mistake is not enough.
Yeah.
It was a mistake. You're like, wait a minute. It ain't like I ordered, the shrimp and you brought out the freaking chicken. That's a mistake. You took a life. That's a crime. And we have sophistry with our language, and we don't want to call spades anymore.
Right. Yeah.
What we witnessed was an execution on film by a person that, under color of law, thought they would be immune, and nobody would say nothing. But we're saying things, and not only are we saying things, we're saying things across racial barriers, because even people who are not Black know it's wrong, and they can't hide it no more.
Well, I think the most fascinating point that came out of that, like watching people struggle with that thought of morality and humanity, right? Because people were trying to find a justification of why she was executed, to a point where it was groups of people saying she did throw the pot of water, when you clearly hear the pot hitting the ground when she ducks. That's not a person throwing water, but because the cop made a statement, said she did throw the water because the water is starting to go over here, not using logic and saying, what happens to spilled water? It moves.
Yes.
It flows.
Yes. And it cools quickly.
It cools quickly.
Because no, go ahead, bro. Yeah, I'm sorry.
In this right here, you start to see the fracture of how people are struggling with other people's humanity.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to touch on, is that we are seeing people really struggling with their morality, right? What they believe, right? And how they can take what they believe and still dehumanize people, right? You know what I'm saying? So even in that, even in that killing, Sonya Matt, any reasonable person can say that, hey, you see that officer approaching her, he is putting himself purposely in harm's way, right? he sees she doesn't have any weapons, you know what I mean? He can back up, de-escalate the situation, you know what I mean? And he wasn't trying to de-escalate the situation. He was trying to escalate the situation, you know what I'm saying?
Even at the beginning of the interaction, what took you so long to come to the door for?
Yeah, he was already.
Put my clothes on him, bro. Like, but there's a narrative that I talk to a lot of people when it comes to policing, but what I'm learning is that not only are the arguments not effective anymore, the culture isn't effective anymore. They can no longer circle the wagons like they used to. And they're learning that if we don't get ahead of these things, it's going to make it look like we're complicit. So now the chief has to come out early. The people have to make statements. A lot of officers, people don't tell you this, but a lot of officers in their contracts when they sign these agreements can't say negative things about actions that other officers done that have not been adjudicated through the court system.
Oh, yikes.
People don't know that. They don't know that when somebody does a settlement for a multi-million-dollar lawsuit, I cannot speak negatively about the department in public anymore. I can talk about the police, but I can't say the Louisville police. I can't, because in my settlement, I said that we will not acknowledge we did anything wrong.
So in contractual agreement, they created the blue line.
So
also, like in the military, I mean, we can speak up.
But the challenge that I'm seeing most of the times is that when it comes to these agreements, I think that it's like buying your silence.
Yeah.
And it doesn't change the law when I get a settlement, because what happens is that there's no precedent in a courtroom where somebody said this was wrong that now can be used as a precedent for further wrongdoing, which is a dangerous slope, because we have not had the processes of injustices codified it in case law. They've been codified in our imagination and our conscience, and there's this idea of the trauma activated activists, or the trauma initiated activist, meaning somebody who's only concerned about an issue because it caused them trauma. In order to solve that trauma, they want to create organizations to do it. Like, Mothers Against Drug Driving, America's Most Wanted. They both had issues where something tragic happened to a family member. The only problem is when we're doing advocacy from trauma is we don't get educated in the trauma. Our education, our healing, instead of coming through education, comes in advocacy and talking to people about our experience. However, that's a form of therapy, and usually you can't be in rooms making decisions if you need therapy. They don't want to hear you. Nobody wants to hear a Black person talking about in a room talking about policy reform with emotional reasoning. Just don't want to hear it, because they ain't on it. They want to know, what are the facts, what can we do, blah blah blah, and leaving that, to your point, the human element out of it, because the organization is too big to fail. And if I go to a restaurant in town, and it's the only restaurant in town, and the service is bad, they can tell me, listen, shut up, be happy you got something to eat. Because they know you got nowhere else to go. And I think when it comes to our public policy with policing, specifically with this case, I think it's so important to know that the guy was dishonorably discharged from the military, or he got a bad conduct discharge, DUIs, 6 departments, and he kept being, and this is the white privilege that people don't understand. You couldn't get in the military with DUI. DUI, bro. He had dishonorably discharge, under less honorable conditions, several DUIs, bad, not following orders. Like, the dude was a renegade, and it took him murdering someone for we to say this is an issue.
Right.
And what at the policy level could have been done? How about this? Any police officer who was discharged with less than honorable conditions from the military can't be a police officer. Problem solved. If you need at least an honorable or a general discharge or medical, if you don't have one of those discharges, if it's under the honorable, less than honorable, dishonorable, sorry. Because if you couldn't serve our nation good, you think you'll serve
the community?
Serve community well? No.
It's a community that don't look like you.
And that's why the argument can be made right now for that policy, but the policy would seem emotional. It would seem like reactionary. And the people who make policy in this country don't do it from emotion. They do it for resources, power, and control. And they will. That's why when the Democrats put that kente cloth on and took that knee, it's like, bruh, it's like, okay, where's the legislation at though?
Legislation, yeah. Where's the legislation for the policy?
Legislation and then put the kente cloth on.
Yeah, for real.
You know what I'm saying?
You could tell it was Nancy Pelosi's idea. She was out front and she was basically saying, I'm fighting everybody to bring up any policy.
I'm just like, whatever. But
actually, it was the idea of the CBC.
Yeah, I was messing around.
They're losing political power too, man, because I think what they're realizing is that the Tea Party really was the last straw to the Conservative Party. The Tea Party removed the sensible Republicans,
right?
Because to your point about economics, and this is my thought process for the larger kinetic scale of war in America. Historically, any violence has been preceded by economic issues first, because economic issues will call into play the resources how they will be allocated. So we already know how resources are allocated in this country. That's why during Katrina, it took so long to get those resources in there. Had it been Martha's Vineyard, they'd had the Navy with cruisers off of Nantucket Sound. You know what I'm saying? You had a destroyer just with the supplies. We get that. We've already anticipated expecting it. Now, this is the challenge, and what I focus on is called punctuated equilibrium. Essentially, in order to change a policy anywhere, there's people who have a monopoly on that policy. They own a stranglehold on it, so to speak. And then the process doesn't change, and it goes through periods of stasis or of near change. And then an event happens. It's like, boom, George Floyd happened. We need an act. We need a law. Justice and Police Act. Because after that long period of stasis, we're like, wait a minute, this ain't right. We need action. Now, when that action comes, the policy monopoly people have to be quiet because you didn't stop this from happening, policy people. It's on your radar. So now specialized people who look at the issue can now form a policy monopoly, because now Jay has a way of looking at this issue that the people with power don't see it. However, he has a problem getting his idea to the people who understand how problems are solved. But he doesn't, because he gets this idea that the problem is solved by letting other people know that the problem exists. Your job is, so once you let people know the problem exists, you have now, like you did with that coworker, you have put the idea into their mind, that I put in people's mind, that nothing is wrong or broken in policing. It operates how it was intended to function.
That's intended, yeah, exactly.
So if you say something is wrong with it, you're already conceptualizing I need to fix it. And I'm like, nothing needs to be fixed. This is what they designed. It's built correctly. And the cornerstone was on not protecting or giving psychological safety to people who are Black. That's what the cornerstone of the organization was. Has it changed over time? Yes. Has it been, but has there been long periods of stasis where we went from 50, 60 years of no progress, of benign neglect? Yes. And as we see this happening on the smaller level, economic issues hit poor people first. Because they hit poor people first before wealthier people, the wealthier people aren't realizing that the water beneath them is getting bubbled. There's a spillover effect. But by the time it hits the people who are middle class or well off to do, the poor people are already very affected by it. And policies have usually already been put into place to inhibit or limit a lot of the upward mobility, meaning government programs will be reduced, Social Security will be reduced. They're going to limit from the people who need it the most at the time they need it the most, which will essentially create a backlash. Because now the people who like, for example, if they cut off the SNAP program for 1 month in this country, there'll be pandemonium.
And yeah, that'd be
because the SNAP program feeds 40-something million people a month.
I mean, we saw that during the pandemic where people couldn't get SNAP money and there was long lines.
That's what I'm saying. So how long would it take?
Things.
And you layer that on top of the political issues that are all on front.
Mm-hmm.
And that creates a very dangerous storm. And that's a storm of necessity first. Because I tell people all the time, it will not be love of our fellow brother that creates unity among the Black community in this country. It will not be. It will be necessity. It will be the fact that you're put into a place where I need you to survive. I literally need I need to know what's going right now in South Carolina for this country.
This is how the Black Power movement. This is how the Black Power movement comes about.
Yeah, I need to know what's going on.
Yeah. And then
because if I know what's going on in South Carolina, because you guys are a bellwether. South Carolina's where the first one started at.
Yeah,
Charleston Harbor. Hey, Charleston Harbor, and because that spirit of rebellion is still there.
Yeah.
It's still there. I was there. I told you, I went to South Carolina, bro, and I saw the plantations and it's like, wow, I felt like I was tipping in
the Confederate flags.
I felt like I was in a time warp. I was just like, where are we at?
Depending on where you go, you are in the time warp down here, man. Like people are.
But there is the beauty of it is that we can now share in real time, in the historical time, that there was a white kid that drove from Atlanta, Georgia to take down a Confederate flag in South Carolina. Like those stories give me hope for our country.
Yeah.
It won't be. See, I think the concern is when this becomes kinetic, we need to get out the way because it ain't our fight. Like this
you're having the same revolt that's happening in Tennessee.
Oh, neo-Nazis.
Yeah, the neo-Nazis was walking and like the communities literally got together, and what one video showed the community literally violently chasing them out.
Yeah, and that's what it's going to take because they are not going to go peacefully. And if they become more rabid, the thing is that we have not trained the police forces or the government forces in this country to deal with large-scale white violence. We just don't. We're not ready to massacre large-scale of white people doing violence. We saw it on January 6th.
We saw it on January 6th. Yeah.
We're just not ready because we have not conceptualized the framework where we are being told that the greatest domestic threat to America is not the southern border. It's not inflation. The greatest domestic threat is white supremacist political violence targeted at people who have historically been the victims of this violence because they want to accelerate their revolution 2.0 so they can reestablish Christian national white supremacist values. And they see,
not to interrupt you, but the FBI has been saying this since like 2000.
No. But see, I'm not concerned that they're saying it. Them saying it is a distraction to me. What are you doing about it?
Yeah.
How many have you infiltrated? How many undercover agents are you going to these Klan rallies to get these guys' information where they work at?
Yeah.
Because we knew government employees was in there storming that building.
Like, hey, look. They didn't call. I mean, there was an active duty military member, Air Force guy, who got kicked out because he was at a white supremacist rally handing out flyers.
Yeah. The major from the Marines was in the Capitol.
22.
Yeah.
Crazy. But they know this, and they don't know how to vet. And I think that we're in an era now where discernment is going to be so powerful because it will be a superpower. Because you're not going to be able in a fear environment to create allies in a way that you would traditionally do it. Because Dr. Francis Quest Welsing says, if you're a white person and you want to be an ally to black people, then tell us what white people are saying when we ain't around about us. Well, let us know what they're talking about us when we're not around.
Yeah. Because
if you let us know, then we could be more prepared. And I don't think anybody, to your point about why listening to conservative radio is important, it's even though it's tough sometimes.
It is hard.
I ain't gonna lie, it's tough because sometimes it's ignorance, but But I will tell you this: this is where the majority of the country is getting their conservative arguments from.
They are,
and it's not Ivy League material. It's Bush League. It's identity politics.
yeah.
It's just so ugly.
101, man. It's crazy.
And it's like when we do our country, like when the white supremacists called J.D. Vance's wife out, and he said, "Well, I know she ain't white." I'm like,
but I love her.
I love her. She's a great mom. What? Like that sounds like something. No, seriously, that sounded like something that could have been said in the 1850s.
For real.
White dude just raped a enslaved girl that was shacking up with him. She ain't white, but I love her.
I love her.
I love her. She's great. She's great to the kids. That's really the same argument. I'm not going to disavow those comments and say that's repugnant and say that my wife, despite your concerns, because your bigoted racial concerns,
right?
J.D. Vance would say bigoted racial issues. He would have had. I think he would have got more support because now it's like, wait a minute, we want the dude who's going to be running the country to at least not openly diss his wife at the expense of white supremacy.
Yeah,
we know Biden wouldn't do that.
Yeah, but no, Doc. Like when I heard that, but the only thing I could think of was like, all right, man. The reason that what didn't get that big of a backlash is because there are people of Indian heritage who come from India. They already see themselves as white. They are already white in India. They see themselves as white. We have Bobby Jindal. We've had Vivek Ramaswamy. We've had Nikki Haley. I mean, they already see Dinesh D'Souza. They already see themselves as white. So they did not hear J.D. Vance's comment as being, bigoted or racist or, or whatever. They just took it as, oh, we say that stuff over there.
Yeah. If you look at what's her name, Ann Coulter and Ramaswamy interview where he told him to his face, that she would not vote for him because he's not a Yah'm, right?
Yeah.
And there was no pause to think when Ramaswamy responded. He literally just moved on the conversation.
Because he shocked him because he's like, wait, I've been told. My parents tell me we, because of our society. You know what I mean? Like, nah, brother.
He's not seeing the idea of the model minority.
The model minority, yeah.
Because in order to assimilate successfully, and I think this is a cultural issue that we see today, primarily in the Black community, where how you look is more important than what you know.
Right.
Like I look successful, so I'm good. I can put on the image. I put my suit on and my tie, my button-up shirt, my colonial knot on there, and I go into that building and I say yes and no. Like when I go into work, we say Grand Rising. I say I don't like good morning because I'm not in the morning state right now. I'm happy to be here, Grand Rising. I say if I had a loved one died last night, good morning would be appropriate. But I did it in a way where I didn't make anybody do it. I didn't say you will say to me Grand Rising every morning. No, that's not what I said.
Yeah.
I explained to them why I didn't like hearing it. Then I let them make the choice. I explained to them, and if somebody says it, I can say it back. But the reason I did it that way is because power is the ability to define reality and have other people respond to your definition as if it were their own. That's Dr. Wade Nobles. And I'm realizing that how you take white power away, how you take Eurocentric power away in its most fundamental psychological ideal word sense, you remove the power of white supremacy by essentially saying that you can't do what you used to do into their face. That's not acceptable right now. What you used to do that and it was acceptable. You calling me not Black ain't acceptable anymore. So stop it. And now if you continue to do it, after I told you it wasn't acceptable, now I'm gonna have to enlist other people who share my opinion that you shouldn't be doing this. And it's very simple if you don't have to use the coercive power of the state to do it. Because if I have to get the government to enforce my will on people because I wasn't strong enough in my argument to do it. See what I mean? Like if I can't convince Jay of my argument, so I'm going to run for city council and then have my position at the council override what he just said. That's not fair.
Yeah.
Now, is it powerful? Yes, but it's not fair because if I should be able to have a discussion with you and then say, listen, let me tell you why your ideas are not as effective. Or I can say, let me tell you how your ideas could be more effective. Because the idea of collaboration is the highest form of engagement. When we collaborate, we take the best of both of each other's ideas. I got the best of your idea, the best of my idea, and then Ted can poke holes through both of them. And then Ted can be like, you know what? Let me look at that through a historical perspective.
Right.
You look at that over time and say, if I take Jay's argument to its logical conclusion, what am I left with? What do I have? Because most people can't take an argument that they have and then play it out over time because they don't know the variables that keep the punctuate equilibrium in place. They don't know who the policy monopoly are because in spaces, I told people this time, I live in a majority Black city. Over 50% are Black. I live in a city where we had the first Black mayor of a major U.S. city. It was Cleveland, Ohio. Carl Stokes in 1967 became mayor of Cleveland, Ohio, and the first Black mayor before the South. You know, this is a historical achievement. But then you ask, how did he become mayor? He became a mayor at the time there was not a Black majority in the city. So how did a Black man become mayor of a predominantly white city in America? But we don't conceptualize it that way.
Right, yeah.
But that's what he did. It wasn't like a whole bunch of Black folk voted for you. No, you couldn't have won if every Black person voted for you. You couldn't have won. It just don't work that way. But what he was able to do was form coalitions. He was able to form coalitions, and politics is about forming coalitions of like-minded people. For example, you have Republicans against Trump right now. There is a coalition of Republicans who are saying, I'm going to vote for anybody but you, bro. I don't care who it is. But you got people, Nikki Haley's, for now her supporters are like, we will Kamala now.
Yeah.
So, and the reason you can't poll this coalition effectively is because you don't poll it traditionally. You have to poll this quantitatively by using different methods. And that is knowing these coalitions, knowing that there's a group of women who are pissed off right now that they daughters have less autonomy than they had.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, how do you feel about the issue? They just don't like that because they've watched The Handmaid's Tale.
Right.
And now we're getting to a point where I think that the choices have never been as clear as they are today. Like we're forgetting the guy who says, I want to be a dictator on day one, the guy who got an animus, who gonna pardon the January 6th dudes, listen, when a corrupt person rules over your country, all it does is it encourages corruption. That's all it does.
Yeah.
Because look how high he got with a felony. Well, shoot, I could be a senator. I could be a senator.
We got felons that can't even get jobs, that can't even get government support, that can't even get all these things. And this person got a felony and is running for the highest office in the land. Make it make sense, man. I mean, I know why that is, you know.
But you know what? I think this is an opportunity, especially for Democrats or the left, to reach out, because what the Republican voters are saying is, I believe in second chances now. Oh, so since Donald Trump is their guy, and now they believe in second chances. I believe
for people of Eurocentric descent.
Yeah. So now put the theory to test for everyone through policy and see it supported.
Man, but that's the problem. The problem is that they can't put it to any policy because the term felon was only created to disenfranchise black people. It was never, the term felon was never created as a bar for a white person.
Yes.
So we get that. Now the concern is that once we see the hypocrisy, the question then becomes is, and I won't give people free publicity. So I won't say their names anymore because I just feel like it's unnecessary. I'll say something like felon. I've heard the argument that it is a negative connotation because so many black people have felonies, and it was some kind of redeeming quality of him for running. Like, hey, you're gonna get more black support because you have felonies. And I'm like, who's telling you this? Yeah. Like, this ignorance is a higher level. Like, black people are just so criminal that because you a felon, you got our support. Like, that's just, anyway, I'll leave that alone. But the reason that I see this is such a divisible issue is because rights, privileges, etc., only work if I can give them to my children. In Ohio, the Republicans have a supermajority in the state legislature. They can pass any bill they want, supermajority. No one can stop them, but they're still wondering about, because they gerrymandered the state so effectively, they realized they created a problem. And that problem was 50% of the state doesn't support them, but they can't do it through their legislation because they're cut off everywhere. So we've said we'll use the petition process and just change the law without your help, despite your supermajority. So what did they do? They said, well, let's change the majority from 51% to 60%. And it failed. It failed. And it failed because they're trying, even though they have a supermajority now, to keep it so their children can have that supermajority later. Because racism that cannot perpetuate itself will not live. And they can only perpetuate it while they control the mechanisms of government now. That's why this election is so consequential and so dangerous, and why people are talking about civil war as a result of it, because they know that the demographics of this country do no longer support conservative ideology. I think it was in 2022, 27% said I'm Democrat, 27% said I'm Republican. The majority, 40-something% says I'm an independent. Like, most people are independent. If you've already made your mind up on the issue before you heard it, you're an ideologue. I'm like, listen, I don't know. I don't follow a Democratic position. I don't follow a Republican position. Tell me what the issue is. I'll tell you what the position is. And it's like, and people think that just because you're voting for somebody, you support everything that they stand for.
Right, exactly.
So, like, it's such a polarization fallacy. It's a distortion. Like, I don't support everything anybody does. I don't support everything my wife does. But
I'm gonna say something on that point because it's crazy. Because down here where I live at, you know what I mean, we currently have a Republican mayor, right? Republican mayor. And then there's three, other people who are running against them. You know what I mean? They're Democrats, all three of them. You know what I'm saying? And one of my coworkers was like, "Hey man, what you gonna do? Who you voting for?" I said, "I'm voting for the Republican mayor." I was like, unless these three dudes tells me a reason why I don't need to do that. I was like, because I see that the Republican mayor brought economics to this area. Brought, schools, we have better schools. You know what I'm saying? I see it. And the other thing is, I know he's more of a liberal Republican than he is an actual, far right conservative. You know what I'm saying? But that's neither here nor there. But I'm like, you're going to have to convince me. You can't just say, "Oh, I'm black." Nah, brother. What's the plan? What is the plan? And that plan has to relate to my values. I value economic growth. I value human growth. I value, what this other mayor has brought to the city, which is, to this small town, which is housing, jobs. You know what I mean? It brought hospitals, keeping the hospital open, you know what I mean? Affordable healthcare, childcare. Like, I see all that. So what are you going to do different? You know what I'm saying? What is...
But I think that's the reason that they're saying that all politics is local is so important.
Yeah.
Because at the local level, politics is what affects me currently.
Yeah.
Are you setting up policies that are going to help me or hurt me at the local level? And what I'm learning for most of the times, what people are doing is they're painting with a broad brush, and they're making generalizations. It's like, it's okay to jump to conclusions if you know how to jump to conclusions. Meaning, like, I'm not jumping rash or impulsively. I'm jumping because the data says indicates this is a good way to jump. Because, and I tell you all the time, it's conservative thinking that keeps the conservatives in line and the radicals in line. At the heart of conservative thinking is we need social order, because without social order, there used to be the law and order party before the whole felony thing. But the conservative argument was we need law and order in order for our society to be just, and without law and order, we will become like animals. That's a really good argument for a society, conservative argument, that we need these things in place. Unfortunately, the argument shifted to culture war. To these people who want to use this bathroom are causing you problems that don't live in your state, that don't live in your city. These are the and this is the weird thing about our country. We have a system called federalism. Federalism means that there's federal and then there's state, local standards. And most people who are complaining about issues in America are not impacted by those issues because they've had the luxury of moving away from those specific spots. Or they've accepted the idea that, guess what? You know what? I'm not in the majority position where I'm at. I am not in the majority. I am in the minority. So what I can do is I can go ask people and share my views, opinions, and beliefs, and try to convince like-minded people that we need to change these policies. But most people that are in the majority don't want to do that. That takes energy and effort. What they want to do is they want to support people who are bigots like them, who they want to give power to and donate money to, and say, hey, go be a bigot for me in Washington so you can send the bleach big body bomb. She said the bleach. Because when they're talking about violence in the Congress, prior to the Civil War, there was a senator that was assaulted almost to his life over issue of slavery. I think it was Massachusetts. Senator was beat by a member of the House over his position on slavery. Literally, he was like months. He was hospitalized
on the floor.
On the floor, beat him with I think it was on cane or something. He beat him with.
Yeah, it would have been with a cane. Yep.
And so we see, because politics is local, it's going to start with them first. When Marjorie Taylor Greene made that comment about the lady's eyelashes, it's like, wait a minute, are we here to talk about each other, or are we here for our country?
Right. Yeah.
Because people who don't have an argument just want to argue.
Right. Exactly.
And I'm thinking, like, if you want to argue with me, you better be ready, because I will concede if you make a good point. No idea has possessed my mind that I can't divorce myself from it if not presented with data. And I would argue that intelligence is how quickly you can do that. Some people,
I like to say, because we found ourselves, I think yesterday, in the post, having this same circular conversation about the Democratic Party and Megan Thee Stallion and the twerk and so forth. And it's like, once you started getting to like, well, did you find any policies information? Like, and nobody can tell you if they found any policy information or anything, but they just kept telling us about the twerking. And at that point, they could not realize that it was really their critical thinking that was broken. And no matter on how many points we were trying to move it to policy, twerking was the biggest issue.
And that's and I see this happening like a distraction. It's like a misdirection. It's like a magician. Look at my left hand, but it's like, you know. And,
I'm a
and, right. Yeah, yo, it's like what I'm learning, and it's like when Kendrick Lamar made that song, "They Not Like Us," I think it became an anthem because you had to ask yourself a question: Who is they? Who are we? And why they not like us?
Yeah.
And so it was 3 questions that hit me right up top. Who are they? And it's like there are some people who are black in color only. They call them bicos. Who are black in color. You have black skin, but you do not know the black condition, or you want to. The one thing that I find about being a conservative in America is you got to have a very short memory. You can't have you cannot have a memory that goes back too many decades.
Yeah.
You gotta be like an 80s baby. Because you gotta be an late 70s, 80s baby. You know, and because if you was a 60s and an early 70s baby, you know what the deal is.
Yeah, for
you
real.
got time for that.
Nobody, yeah.
These younger ones grew up in a I don't want to say like a Camelot type of world where they were the first generation of Black Americans, myself included, you probably all, the first generation of Black Americans who saw unencumbered success in Blackness. Meaning we saw so many glass ceilings being broken in our lifetime, it created an idea of perpetual progress. We saw a Black president. There's been 2 Black female senators in our lifetime. The first Black female senator was in 1992 from Chicago, Carol, the one that Obama.
We watched Jesse Jackson run for president, and we watched Jesse Jackson run for president.
That's what I'm saying.
A substantial part of a percentage of the vote.
But so you see that the era that we grew up in was more egalitarian. It's more progress. So you think we'd be progressives. You would think we'd be progressives because we want to continue the level of progress. But any time that there's Black progress in America, there's white resentment. White resentment comes from Black progress. So the Tea Party was the white resentment from Obama. And it was resentment. But what they realized is that history is cyclical. That's why you're having circular arguments.
Right.
Because when the progress stops, the conservatism is needed. And it's needed from people who don't see the world from a historical lens, who only see it from the relevancy bias or from a bias that the time that I grew up in is the best time. Well, my childhood was the best time in American history. We are the part of the greatest generation. Remember World War II said we're the greatest generation? Like, who dubbed you that?
Yeah, who said that? Like that.
The dude who coined the term Harlem Renaissance was born in 1915. But the Harlem Renaissance was from 1920 and 1933.
Yeah.
So why was the dude born who was 5 years old when it started? Why does he name it? Because it was called initially the New Negro Movement.
Yeah.
It was so he just conceptualized it as a renaissance. Because by saying a renaissance, it is a reawakening of our art, of a music, of a culture, of a science, of a history. A renaissance is more just a movement. So he had to say it's more than that. Like today, we're conceptualizing that the civil rights movement wasn't just a civil rights movement. That's what y'all called it.
Right.
That's not what we thought it was. Y'all called it, we wanted civil rights. Like, no, that was the entry level. We just, once you became civil, now I want to be uncivil with you.
Yeah. And I always got to remind people that the civil rights begins in the 1880s.
There you go. Civil rights started when they had the society that was created to move Black people back to Africa.
Yeah.
This is what the civil rights movement was, and it became uncivil once they found out that if I teach these people the debate, I think the great debate in this country rested in the 1700s. Is should we teach these Negroes Christianity? That was a very divisible issue in our country. People don't realize that.
Yeah.
the leading thinkers of the time, Thomas Jefferson's dad, Peter Jefferson, was anti-teaching black people religion. He said, if we teach them religion, then they will create a tool to rise up against us. That was the pervasive thought up until, after the Civil War. Should we give them religion? Then they found out through experimentation that religion made them better slaves. Not just better slaves, they actually could sell them for more money. Like if you had Christianity, they knew you wouldn't fight back, you wouldn't revolt, you would obey your master. It was like the perfect system because they tailored it to be a slave religion.
And that came from sorry to interrupt you, Doc, but it was an argument made by a woman, a black woman. She was married to a white man, and said that she couldn't be a slave. This was like the 1600s.
Yes.
Could not be a slave because she was a Christian.
Yes.
And they were like, no, you.
No, they went to court.
Yeah, they went to court. Yeah, they went to court.
And court about that one. And the reason that was so impactful is because there was no national government at the time.
Right.
And so Virginia passed, or actually New England, actually Massachusetts specifically, passed some of the most restrictive slave codes in the colonies. Where I think it was Virginia who was like, if your mother is an enslaved person, you're automatically enslaved.
You're automatically enslaved.
No matter what percentage your ethnicity is in another group. And the hypocent precedent created a standard where people don't want to use what they did before. Now I find that confusing where what happened to the one drop rule? We just got rid of it. Because now if the one drop rule was in effect, we wouldn't have to worry about Kamala's ethnicity.
Yeah.
If you use your rule that you created, that you use for division, that all we are saying is now we're reminding you of what you already said. And you forgot. So we're gonna remind you. And that's what King said in his book, Where Do We Go From Here? Community or Chaos? He said, America, if you do not address the issues of inequality with the Negro, they will remind you of your crimes.
Yep.
We will remind you. And
Abraham Lincoln said something very similar too. Like African Americans would be the constant reminder.
Yeah. And Jefferson in the Notes on Virginia wrote that I weep for my nation when I understand that God is just. He understood that eventually recompense would come to people for being the unjust people. He knew that. It's like sowing and reaping. If you sow injustice, you ain't gonna reap righteousness. You know what I'm saying? If you sow injustice, it's gonna come. And they understood this principle. I was under the impression, because of evolution, that the average understanding of the majority of Black people in our country, the average is 50 to 100 years behind the average reality of the white indigenous country. Psychologically behind and educationally behind. And that's only by policy, to your point. We didn't know that Nietzsche predicted the death of God in the 1800s. He said that God is dead. He lamented it not as a thing that to be proud of. Because what we're finding out now, and I told my daughter this, because before you give people abstract ideas, they need concrete ones first. Before you give an abstract. So I said, your mother and me created you. I said, well, you're a creator. Yes, for all intents and purposes, me too, people. Now, we're not the creator. We're your creator.
Right.
I have a creator too. I have a mother. They're my creator. Now, because we created you in our image and our likeness, because that's what the Genesis says. God said, let us make man in our image and our likeness. That word Elohim means plural, means us.
Us. Yeah.
It means us. It's not uniform. So the idea of God is not one person. No one person can be God by default, because it takes us to make something in their image and likeness. And what has happened into our conceptual framework is the Afrocentric mind never viewed the Trinity that was holy outside of Father, Mother, Child. That was our Trinity. The Eurocentric Trinity was Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
Yep.
By removing the mother from the equation, I can now reinforce into your mind the patriarchal idea that my son will rule you.
Mm-hmm.
And when I can teach you that my son will rule you, I have to now give you processes to respect my authority without challenging it under the idea of an abstract idea that your creator is God, who just so happened to give me authority over you.
Yeah.
I just reject that whole idea. And I reject it because it's not valuable anymore, because it doesn't produce a conceptual framework where I can teach my children an idea that they can understand and now forming a consciousness from it. That when you say you don't want to be here, I can tell you I didn't want to be here. None of us want to be here. But we're here in such a time as this. And I think we're in a very interesting time, because those who've been in the military know this, that if you fight somebody, there's two ways to fight primarily. I can fight you symmetrically or asymmetrically. And the only time I want to fight you symmetrically if we have equal resources.
Mm-hmm. Then
I have to fight you, man to man. In the event that you have more resources than me, fighting you face to face is not a good idea. It's not a good strategy. So guerrilla warfare becomes the tactic, the Ho Chi Minh way, the Vietnam way, the make tunnels. And what is so powerful about asymmetric warfare in our context is that there is no defense against us. There is no defense against the ideas, because we don't realize that when the Supreme Court ruled the way they ruled on January 6th about the immunity for the felon, they overturned a precedent called Brandenburg v. Ohio. And Brandenburg v. Ohio gave the limits of when speech cannot be free anymore. Essentially, if your speech leads to imminent lawless action, it can't be free.
Mm-hmm.
Can't be free. So, but what the court did was, by saying that his actions were immune, they're saying that as long as I have political power, I can create lawless actions in my followers. That's what they really said. If you strip away all of the niceties and subtleties, they overturned Brandenburg v. Ohio, which was a 1969 case that's pretty much said that the reason that case was important is because it was the Ku Klux Klan wanted to do open processions in the state of Ohio.
Mm.
They wanted to do this, and they wanted to share white supremacist literature with their followers. And Ohio law was created to say they couldn't do that. Hey, you can't spread this toxic stuff everywhere. The Supreme Court said, yes, you can spread the toxic stuff everywhere. You just can't act upon the toxicity.
Mm.
So you have the right to share your ideas, but you can't push the people who have those ideas to do violence.
Yeah.
January 6th was sharing the ideas of toxicity and then pushing them to violence.
Right.
So by all extensive purposes, he failed the Brandenburg test.
Mm-hmm.
Because your people really did violence after you radicalized them.
Yeah.
So by overruling Brandenburg, what you created is a standard now that cannot be counteracted by law. There is no more law anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That was the law.
Mm-hmm.
The
So now
law
you have to create a whole new constitutional law, actually,
yes.
in order to override. That's what Biden is talking about doing.
But until that happens, it does not exist.
That's going to be tough,
and
man.
People don't know that because because the court doesn't talk about that. But it was overturned, like the same way they overturned Roe v. Wade.
Yeah.
But they overturned Roe v. Wade directly.
Yeah.
They overturned Brandenburg silently.
Right.
You have to know what you were looking for, because the previous case was Dennis versus the USA. And Dennis v. USA happened 4 years earlier. And this was the communists were trying to share their messages with each other. And then the government was like, you can't share communist propaganda with each other because it might lead to violent overthrow of our government, because they understood how radicalization happens.
Yeah.
But when the Ku Klux Klan wanted to do it, they were like, okay, that's part of that systemic racism that nobody can seem to find in America.
Yeah.
Where's it at? Can't locate it anywhere. It's like, it's right there, bro. And the court just codified it in law.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, if you see this clearly, what it says is now I can radicalize people to violence, call for them to do violence. When the violence is done, all I have to do now is pardon the people who did the violence, because any presidential official act is not open to scrutiny anybody. Pardon the people who do the unlawful act, which essentially nullifies the law, meaning I can create lawless people and not have any consequences for it, for my political purpose.
Right.
And that is, to me, one of the more dangerous things that the court did that isn't being really talked about.
Yeah, that is, man. And you know, and on that note, man, we're gonna go ahead and shut things down. You know, as always, Doc, appreciate you, man.
Hey,
Appreciate
man.
you coming through. Yeah, I'm happy for last words, man. Go ahead, Jay.
Man, like, share, comment. Now I'm saying podcast. I really enjoyed this conversation. You know, I really think, like, on the ground level, like, we really be trying to get into the sauce, right? We don't want to know that it's liquid. We want to know what seasons you put into the sauce.
Yeah.
And I think that we really try to get into it and really try to talk to our people on a level that we're bringing in historical context, and also information, and mixing it up to tell people, you know, how things are playing out in society to get the very ingredients that you see.
Yes.
Because this stuff don't come from nowhere.
Yeah.
You know, and we have to start tactically thinking about these things, and not worrying about someone twerking on the stage. We have to start looking past those things and looking at the moves that have to be made.
Yeah. Doc, you have any last words?
No, I will tell you, man. You know, I think about how to most effectively use my time in these days. You know, as we see the rhetoric being toned up, like, you know, before a tsunami, the water recedes. The recession is for you to know it's time to get out of the water, time to run to safety. But we're in a time where people can't see or hear, and I don't mean with their eyes or ears. I mean they're blinded by idealism. They're blinded by influencers. I told them before.
Yeah, man.
We misunderstood what the word demon means. The word demon was not a good or bad person or entity. A demon was an influencer, etymologically. It just means somebody who could influence what you're doing. So when you tell me I follow so-and-so, all you're telling me is you're influenced by this individual.
Right.
But when you're influenced by ideas, not people, when you're influenced by ideas, you don't get stuck in a time period. Because good ideas are timeless.
Right.
They exist without anybody's interference because they're pervasive. They have stood the test of time because the test of time was not able to break them. This is what I want. I want lessons that can be translated beyond us so that we don't get so short-sighted to thinking that this one anybody from any party on any day has enough power that can change anything.
Right.
That's not how it works.
Right.
These are spokesmen, they're influencers. And there was something that Drake said after his song Push-Ups in referring to Kendrick Lamar. He pretty much baited Kendrick Lamar and said, look, man, don't make me wake the demon up. This is what Drake said to Kendrick. Like, hey, but see, what people don't understand is that if you wake demons up, they work both ways. So when you wake yours up, mine comes awake too. And if you want to be influential on people, then the first thing you have to do is say two things. The first casualty in any war is the truth. And if I'm seeking truth and understanding first, I can't fight you even if I try, because I won't let you not tell me the truth. I won't allow you to not tell me the truth. And because I won't allow you to tell me the truth, you cannot put me into an emotional state that will require me to attack you. Because I need the truth first. Because if we're going to be fighting, we're going to be fighting for the right thing. And unfortunately, I see a lot of people who are influenced by a lot of things that are self-serving.
Yeah.
But when conflict comes, we need groups, we need community, and we need something we've never had and a concept we've never been able to do. And challenges this. Someone said, and he got trouble for this. He says it takes a village to raise a child. But then the guy says, what if the village is full of idiots? We never conceptualized that the village that was supposed to raise the child ain't qualified. And but whether or not they are or not, we have to wrestle with it.
Right.
We have to examine the village and say this village doesn't build the type of people that we need. And so I encourage that for you guys. When you guys in South Carolina, man, keep me in the loop, because so often as a northerner, I hear articles from the South that concern me. No, I mean, really concern me, because I know, to your point, Jay, I know why they need to tone the rhetoric up now. Why we think in 4-year cycles. We don't think in 100-year cycles. We think in 4-year cycles, where we can only talk about the issues of Black people for a 6-month window out of that 4-year election cycle. This is silly to me. But in order to get out of that 4-year thinking cycle, we need a strategy for Trump and against Trump. We need a strategy for Kamala and against Kamala. We need a strategy for everybody. Because if we're just giving people passes and not having a strategy for them, it'll catch us off guard.
Yeah.
And if you got to go to war, the last thing you want to do is be caught unaware.
No permanent enemies.
Yes.
Yeah. That's it, man. And my last word is that, getting folk to understand the time that we in, man. We're in historical times. We're not in a time right now to where there are two sides. That's gone, man. Look, we've been in a decade of Trumpism, literally a decade of Trumpism. There is no both sides. The Republican Party, with the selection of J.D. Vance, said that we are done with Reaganism. We are done. We are moving over to the words that was said in Newt Gingrich's contract with America. We are moving to the aggressiveness of the Tea Party. Now we are moving towards more towards Pat Buchanan. You know what I mean? And in the words of Pat Buchanan, when he took David Duke's campaign rhetoric, we are done. There is no both sides, and there's only one side talking about civil war. So you know what I mean. And we got to progress and be progressive. And I know we're out of time, because you know what I mean. I most definitely wanted to touch on a point about. I'll probably talk about it again later, but you know what I'm saying about Black people are not being conservative. We've never been conservatives. We've always been pragmatic and or progressive. So that's a conversation for another time. But and understand that we as Black people cannot be divisive within our own ethnicity, within our racial group. You know what I mean? Argue the policies and the ideals, not the humanism. I don't, that other stuff, doesn't matter. So with that note, I don't know what happened here. What? Okay, dang, John went away. I don't know what's going on. We're gonna head out, man. Appreciate y'all. Appreciate again, Dr. Ham. We out.
Amen. Out.